Tucker Carlson unleashed a firestorm recently by resetting, essentially, the January 6th narrative by providing more context to the situation and releasing previously unreleased footage to the public, and that has really shaken up the establishment. So, my friends, as many of you may be aware, if you're not living under a rock, the Fox News host of Tucker Carlson Tonight, Tucker Carlson, really set off a lot of people recently by releasing footage that the public hadn't really seen that adds extra context to the story of January 6th. The most famous piece of footage he released was evidence of the QAnon shaman, Jacob Chansley, walking peacefully through the hallways and praying in the Senate chamber, which he had entered, which is one of the reasons he's been charged for entering in the Senate chamber, praying for police officers in the Senate chamber, which completely seems to dispute the idea that he was partaking in an insurrection.
Watch.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for giving the inspiration needed to these police officers to allow us in this building.
Now, Tucker Carlson has been attacked from all sides here. He's been attacked from several people in the establishmentarian GOP. He's been attacked from the Capitol Police chief of police. He's been attacked from the White House, which has called him a liar, essentially. He's been attacked from The View, which likened him to George Orwell's 1984, some kind of authoritarian propagandist out of 1984. He's been attacked for so many different things. Mitch McConnell said that Tucker Carlson's ideas or his presentation should be rejected because it is at variance with the official narrative of the Capitol Police. Those were literally Mitch McConnell's words. Chuck Schumer called for Fox News to cease airing Carlson's footage and to tell and shut the entire operation, his entire project, down. Whenever you see such a significant antibody reaction to one single segment or two segments expressing a different view to the dominant worldview, you should be concerned. Red flags should raise in your mind, and you should ask yourself, am I really being told the whole story? Now, and of course, Carlson has established that we're not being told, or that many people were not told the whole story about January 6th. In fact, they were egregiously misled. Now, the story here is not that they lied to you, because Carlson said time and time again, they lied to us, lied to us, lied to us. And many people have said, like social media influencers have said, they have lied to us. Yes, the government is a profound liar. The government is a proficient liar. The government is a professional liar. The government's been lying to you for well over a century now. The government actually, one of the most egregious examples of their lie, whether it be the Gulf of Tonkin incident, whether it be the Fast and Furious drug weapons incident that happened recently, or whether it be their attempts to propagandize the American masses during the 1940s by establishing a wartime propaganda office and hijacking Disney. Yes, they were doing propaganda even back then, and pushing out things to make Americans support the war effort. Psychologically, the government is a master at manipulation. So no one should be surprised that they lied to you. That's not even the important story. The important story here is that if Americans had a more foundationally secure worldview, if more Americans understood the importance of concepts and philosophy, the January 6th narrative would have never gotten to the point where it has in our cultural ethos. It would have never gotten to the point that it has gotten to so far. That's why so many people are having this sort of revelation in their mind after seeing this footage that they may not have been told the truth, but that's only because, and this is my opinion, they have not had a significant understanding of particular concepts. And I'll get into that in a second. That's my core argument. But before I do that, let's actually go over a little bit the context of the January 6th incident, which has been called an insurrection, and we'll go over that in a second as well. So what happened on January 6th? One of the key points of criticism that many have offered Carlson was that he tried to paint it as just a peaceful sightseeing endeavor, when in all reality, in the very first segment that Carlson put out there on January 6th, he quite literally showed several videos of the violence and said, this is what you've been shown. This actually happened, but there's another side of the story. But instead of actually acknowledging his attempt to add more nuance to the story, many in the corporate press have simply derided and mocked him as being some kind of propagandist, ignoring the very material evidence that he's shown. When they cannot beat you on the facts, when they cannot beat you on the truth, they will try to degrade and attack your character. This is the oldest tactic in the book. It's called an ad hominem fallacy. It is an irrational tool, but it is a tool that is used to great effect to smear those who disrupt the establishment narrative. Now, what happened on January 6th? So, January 6th, the entire context around it was that there were a group of Americans that were very incensed with what they believed to be the condition of their elections. And so they took that anger, they took that act of being incensed, and they brought it to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. And during that time, January 6, 2021, and during that time, they attended a rally early in the morning where Donald Trump eventually said in his very long speech that it is your duty to go ahead and march peacefully and patriotically to the Capitol. And many people did just that. A group arrived at the Capitol, and around 2 o'clock, 2:40, around that time, somewhere around that time, is when things started to become a little bit chaotic. And there was a group of people that detached from the main group of the J6 protesters, and they tried busting down doors. Some broke windows. Now, there was also instances that have been established where the doors were open for people. Some doors were kicked open. There were so many things that happened that the sort of timeline of events has become so obscured and so muddled. But the fact is, in some cases, there were literally police leading people through the Capitol. In other cases, that wasn't what's happening. There were police being chased through the Capitol. There's many different sides and facets of the story. But what's important is the moment the doors opened, a lot of people, in fact, most of the people who have been charged today as a January 6th rioter entered the building. And most of those people did absolutely nothing violent. They took selfies. They smiled. They went into offices of people that they elected, whose paychecks they fund. They did all of that. Most of it was not violent. Were there people who were rowdy in the Capitol? Yes. Were there people who were violent in the Capitol? Yes. But most of the people that walked into there, or at least most people that were charged with a crime on J6, were not violent. Don't believe me? According to Business Insider, over 1,000, to date, 1,003 people have been charged for their involvement in January 6th. A vast majority of those people have one charge in common: parading, demonstrating, or picketing in a Capitol building. Most of the charges given on January 6th reflect that kind of crime. Parading, being disruptive, disorderly conduct, nothing violent, just things that violate laws that, in my opinion, shouldn't even be there. You should have the right to demonstrate in the building that you, as a taxpayer, pay for. That seems to be common sense to me. But that is what a majority of the 1,003 people who have been charged with the crime on J6 are hit with. Those kind of crimes. In fact, this charge and these type of misdemeanor charges are so widespread that a federal judge said, why are the prosecutors giving them such lax charges? Why aren't you giving them harsher charges? And even though that federal judge acknowledged that these people, their actions don't justify higher charges, the judge argued that they should get higher charges because of the significance of what they did, because it was an attack on democracy, an attack on the republic. And that's what the DOJ, the Biden DOJ, said throughout the entire incident. This was an attack on democracy. This is an insurrection. And the fourth branch of government, the media, the corporate press, ragged on about this for almost ever since now, and they're still ragging on about it, saying those two things. This was an attack on democracy, and it was an insurrection. Disorderly conduct is not an insurrection. Demonstrating in a building, even if it's in a manner that is somewhat disruptive, that you pay for, is not an insurrection. And yet, that was what was said. That is what was conveyed. And that is at the core of the problem. And so, even though the DOJ threatened so many people who were at J6, and even though the FBI went through great lengths to even question and intimidate people who were merely in the proximity of the protest, not even people who were actually in the building, just in the proximity of the protest, despite all of this, the DOJ, when it came to court, could not sustain high-level charges that would justify their harsh rhetoric towards the people at the Capitol. At best, this was an organized event that became riotous in some sections. At worst, this was a rowdy crowd that became violent in some instances. But in no case, in no way, was this something tantamount to a metaphysical assault on the Republic. In no way was this something tantamount to an attempt to overthrow the government. In no way. Jefferson said the tree of liberty is renewed by blood, and what he meant by that is that resistance and protest and people getting riled up is one of the many ways that Americans have to check their government, to check those in power. Whether you agree with the election ideal or not, that's secondary to the video. It's not even important. What's important is how this was distorted. Now, I mentioned earlier that if Americans had a conceptual understanding of this, they would not have fallen for the media's tricks. They would not have fallen for the corporate press's narrative. So what do I mean by that? So there were two things that were stated over and over and over again about J6. Number one, it was an assault on our democracy. And number two, it was an insurrection. Many of the articles in which you would look at the information about J6 call it an insurrection. Even the article that I cited that has all of these charges, these misdemeanor charges are these nonviolent charges on, call it an insurrection. So there's two things. A populace that is grounded in philosophy and grounded in the science of truth, which is philosophy, would understand that words have meaning, concepts have meaning, and the meaning of those words and concepts should not be assumed. They should be investigated and verified by reason. This is one of the reasons why the American experiment was so profound, so powerful, because the American experiment said that man is a creature of higher order nature because he can reason his way out of things and reason his way towards understanding. And so if you were to apply your faculty of reason, gifted to, refined by philosophy, refined by deeper knowledge, you would find two things. Number one, America is not a democracy. That term is used over and over again to a sickening extent, and it does not actually convey the fundamental character, the fundamental moral character of the American Republic. America is in fact a republic. It is a system in which the people elect government, elect people to represent them in government, and government acts as a hedge, or at least it should act as a hedge, from the passions of the crowd. A republic is a filtration system, a political filtration system, which meets out the wild demands of the majority and protects the minority. This is what a republic is in principle. Unfortunately, that has not always been the case in practice, but in principle, this is what America is. And so someone who may have believed the J6 narrative, may have saw the edited footage, may have believed what the corporate press said. If you had a conceptual understanding of what democracy was, that would have been the first red flag. You could have believed everything they were saying. You could have believed everything about the people, about the J6ers. You could have believed if you had an understanding of what democracy was and what America was, the character of America, that would have been the first red flag that instilled doubt in your mind about the domineering J6 narrative. Okay, second thing, an insurrection. An insurrection is an attempt to overthrow the government. An insurrection is an attempt of an armed and violent attempt to overthrow a government. Now, again, if you had understood what that is, and you had examined the footage, and you had examined, even before this Carlson thing came out, the statements from federal judges, the fact that prosecutors were overcharging and in some cases even undercharging a lot of defendants, and the fact that a majority of the crimes committed on J6, of all those thousands, were non-violent, just disruptive crimes that in most cases would be misdemeanors, you would have understood that there is no way this kind of conduct would be tantamount to a violent attempt to overthrow the government. Picketing in a place you pay for, picketing against people who you elected, is not an attempt to overthrow the government. It's an attempt to keep the government in check. So here's what I'm saying. If you had only known what an insurrection is and what democracy was, you could have believed everything else. If you had known what those two things were, no one would have fell for the corporate narrative. No one. Because your conceptual understanding, your conceptual foundations would have filtered out that information and contextualized it in the broader picture. You may have seen that information from the media, but you would have known, okay, what I'm seeing here is not tantamount to an insurrection. What I'm seeing here is not tantamount to an attack on democracy, because America is not a democracy, so you're mislabeling the situation. So you're already misusing terms, corporate media, and I can see that as a person who understands concepts, and now I'm skeptical of you. My friends, understanding how to use your ability to reason Using philosophy and being connected to the concrete ground of truth is not only the first line of defense against tyrants, it's the first line of defense against illusions and lies. The American people have had a giant illusion cast over them the past few years as of the posting of this video about the true nature and extent of J6. And that illusion is now breaking and deteriorating, and the illusion handlers, the people who are fueling the illusion, are desperately trying to keep their act up by attacking Tucker Carlson, by attacking the individuals involved in getting this information out there, as opposed to focusing on the facts. The facts are simple. Two concepts, that being an insurrection and democracy, were misused to evoke an emotional response in the heart of Americans, get them not to think deeply about the situation, and to then lead them towards a pre-established conclusion that has been cited time and time again by the FBI, by the corporate press, by the government, to the detriment of people who mostly did nothing more than stand around, scream, and shout. Imagine the reaction the power structure would have to our founding fathers, who did two rebellions, the Whiskey Rebellion and the Shea Rebellion, during the founding generation, both of which people went into, in the Whiskey Rebellion, people went into the tax collector's house and said, "You will not tax my whiskey, you will not tax me," and literally embarrassed him in front of everybody. They brought the military to detain the people, and the people simply stand strong. And when Jefferson's presidency came around, the tax was repealed. Imagine how these people would have thought about our founding generation. They would be calling them insurrectionists and terrorists and threats to democracy. But that spirit of revolution is endemic to the American political character. But here's the point. The story is not that they lied to us. The story is that so many people don't really think about concepts very deeply, don't really think about philosophy at all, and don't really apply philosophy to political and current events. And for that simple reason, millions of people were misled. But I hope that it's also for that reason, that philosophy and reason can save us from this illusory trap that we're in, that millions of people will be delivered from their delusions, delivered from the propaganda that they have absorbed, and they will once again see the light of truth. I believe it can happen. I hope you do as well. My friends, I love you guys so much. Be sure to like this video, comment on this video, share this video, subscribe to this channel. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.